Hey everyone, before we dive in, smash that like button if you love epic sci-fi showdowns, drop a comment with what you'd do if you faced an unstoppable predator, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story in this HFY saga. Now let's jump straight into the chaos of the galaxy. Marcus Valen adjusted the grip on his plasma rifle, scanning the fractured landscape of Karath 9. Smoke curled from the scorched wrecks of alien war machines, their sensors still flickering in eerie rhythms. Mercenaries whispered about him across star systems, a human who had survived contracts that obliterated entire fleets. Yet none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the creature that prowled the shadows ahead, a living nightmare the galaxy feared, a predator that had left entire worlds in ruins. He crouched behind a shattered hull, listening to the low rumble of its movements. Even from a distance, the predator exuded a presence that made instinct scream in warning. Tall, armored in scales that shimmered like molten metal, its eyes glowed with a feral intelligence. Marcus had hunted many dangerous beings but none like this. This was legend and terror stitched into flesh, the apex predator everyone across 10 star systems had sworn to kill or die trying. A part of Marcus itched to raise his weapon to strike first and survive. Another part, the part that had kept him alive through ambushes and assassins, urged him to watch, to learn, to understand. Because the galaxy's deadliest force could be predictable, but only if he read it right. The predator moved with startling grace, despite its massive frame, stepping over craters and twisted metal like it was part of the terrain. Its gaze never wavered, scanning, calculating as though it already knew Marcus was there. And maybe it did. Maybe the legends weren't just exaggerations. Maybe it truly could smell fear, sense weakness, and obliterate it in a heartbeat. Marcus remembered the contract in full detail. A wealthy overlord on Carthesia, 7 had promised a fortune for its capture, or death. Most would have fled at the very mention of the predator. He had accepted. Not because of money, though the sum was enough to retire 100 lifetimes. He accepted because he understood a truth no alien could fathom. Survival often belonged not to the strongest, but to the cleverest, and humans were nothing if not clever. He adjusted his visor and scanned the creature's movement patterns, noting the way its shoulders flexed, the flicker of its mandibles. Every predator had a rhythm and every rhythm had a flaw. That flaw was his lifeline. But before he could act, the predator froze, ears twitching in response to something unseen. Marcus's pulse accelerated. Whatever was out there, it wasn't him. Then a low, guttural sound rolled from the predator's throat, a warning or a challenge he couldn't tell. Marcus tensed, every muscle coiled for the inevitable confrontation. The beast's eyes locked onto his position, twin green flames cutting through the smoke. And yet, instead of charging, it tilted its head, studying him as if curiosity outweighed hunger. For a long moment, the battlefield held its breath. Marcus realized something dangerous. He was dealing with intelligence as sharp as his own, if not sharper. This was no mindless killer. It understood stakes, strategy, and perhaps even the value of life in its own brutal way. That awareness sent a shiver through him. A sudden movement caught his eye, a patrol of alien mercenaries moving clumsily through the haze, hunting the same prize. Their chatter was loud, reckless. One step too close to the predator and they would disappear in seconds. Marcus watched, calculating. He could let them fall and gain a temporary advantage, or he could intervene and stake his claim on the creature first. He chose observation. Every flick of the predator's limb, every twitch of its senses, was a clue. It was injured, slight but noticeable, a gash along its flank, scorched armor where a plasma blast had grazed. No apex predator survived long in the wild with weakness like that. But this one had survived, and it had survived for reasons Marcus was beginning to understand. It wasn't just instinct. It was discipline, cunning, patience. The mercenaries entered the clearing. Marcus held his breath, fingers brushing the cold metal of his rifle. He could shoot, take the kill, claim the fortune. But as the predator moved, something unexpected happened. Instead of fleeing, it stepped forward, positioning itself between Marcus and the intruders. It was a deliberate, calculated gesture, protective and terrifying all at once. Marcus's mind raced. This was unprecedented. The legends had never spoken of a predator that paused to assess, that could evaluate an ally or a threat with such precision. And yet, here it was, standing like a living wall. Marcus realized in that heartbeat of clarity that this encounter would not end with a simple kill. There was something to gain here far beyond the contract, something bigger than survival. A plasma shot ripped through the air, grazing the predator's flank. It roared, the sound echoing across the valley like an avalanche. Marcus instinctively dove behind cover, but the predator didn't flee. It turned toward the attackers, fluid and lethal, a symphony of destruction in motion. Marcus watched, part fear, part awe. This was the moment that would define him. The moment where a human faced the apex predator the galaxy feared, and instead of dying, glimpsed the possibility of something extraordinary. The clearing fell silent after the chaos, the alien mercenaries gone or scattered, their screams swallowed by the wind. Marcus crawled forward, heart hammering, and met the predator's gaze. There was no surrender in those eyes. No threat, yet no invitation either. Only recognition. Marcus exhaled, steadying his pulse. The galaxy had sent its terror, and he had survived. But more importantly, he understood something that no one else had. This encounter wasn't about domination or survival alone. It was the beginning of a bond that could shake the stars themselves. He extended a hand slowly, carefully, almost instinctively. The predator's gaze followed, unblinking, assessing, and for a brief, impossible moment, it seemed to consider him. Marcus felt a flicker of something unexpected. A connection, tentative but real. The galaxy would never see him coming. And neither would anyone else. Marcus didn't move his hand. The predator remained where it had paused, a living monolith of muscle and instinct, its eyes tracking every motion he made. Around them, the valley still simmered with the aftermath of chaos. Burned earth, twisted metal, and the lingering scent of ozone. Marcus felt a flicker of curiosity, mingled with caution. He had faced monsters before, but none with the sentience this apex predator radiated. Intelligence was dangerous, but it was also opportunity. He lowered himself onto a rock, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, and studied the creature. The gash along its flank was deeper than he had thought, and despite the adrenaline that fueled its movements, it favored one leg slightly. The predator's breathing was measured, deliberate. It wasn't wounded in a way that would slow its killing ability, but the injury had forced restraint. Marcus recognized the calculation. Survival wasn't about raw strength, it was about precision and patience. Something stirred within him, a recognition of kindred pragmatism. A distant hum broke the silence, the telltale vibration of engines approaching. Marcus tensed. Alien mercenaries were notoriously persistent, and now that they had seen the predator in action, they would not give up easily. But the predator didn't react immediately. Instead, it shifted its stance subtly, almost imperceptibly guiding Marcus toward a narrow ridge above the clearing. It was an invitation, or a test. Marcus didn't know which, but instinct told him to follow. As they climbed, Marcus kept his eyes on the predator, noting every twitch of its muscles, every flicker of its gaze. He began to see patterns, how it gauged terrain, how it anticipated potential threats, how it moved not with randomness, but with an economy of motion. Each observation reinforced what he already suspected. This creature was not merely feared because of strength, but because it calculated, adapted, and survived where others would die. Humans thrived in uncertainty, and for the first time, Marcus sensed that a predator could recognize that same advantage in him. They reached the ridge just as a squad of alien scouts appeared below, their blasters scanning the wreckage. Marcus gestured subtly to the predator, pointing toward a shadowed ravine. The creature tilted its head, then moved, fluid and silent, positioning itself in a way that blocked the scout's line of sight. Marcus's pulse quickened. The predator wasn't just powerful, it understood strategy. It wasn't instinct alone, it was reasoning. A quick exchange of gestures later, and Marcus led the predator deeper into cover. The alien scouts advanced cautiously, unaware of the silent shadow above them. Marcus allowed himself a small smirk. The predator didn't need guidance, but it allowed him to make decisions. That was new. That was an opening. Marcus knew he had to capitalize. They moved through the valley like phantoms, avoiding open spaces and exploiting the terrain. Marcus noticed subtle changes in the predator's behavior. Less raw aggression, more measured observation. It watched him as much as he watched it, analyzing movements, reading intent. He realized that trust, even tentative, was being negotiated silently. The predator had the power to end him in an instant, yet it didn't. That choice was significant. Marcus settled behind a jagged rock, catching his breath. The predator crouched beside him, muscles coiled, eyes sweeping the horizon. The alien squad had stopped, uncertain of what they sensed but unable to pinpoint the threat. Marcus let out a slow exhale, appreciating the irony. The galaxy feared the predator above all else, yet here it was, not acting on its own legend but observing him, learning him. Hours passed in tense silence. Marcus used the time to test small signals, hand gestures, eye contact, subtle shifts in posture. Each time the predator responded. Sometimes it mimicked him, other times it initiated subtle movements of its own, testing boundaries. Communication was emerging, unspoken yet unmistakable. Marcus realized that survival in this partnership would not depend solely on brute force. It would require understanding, intuition, and timing. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but so far that unpredictability had earned cautious respect. As night fell, the valley darkened under twin moons. Shadows deepened, and Marcus could see the predator's silhouette against the dim light. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but loud enough that the predator could hear. "We survived this," he said. "Together." There was no reply, yet Marcus sensed acknowledgement in the tilt of its head, in the subtle shift of its stance. He wasn't imagining it. It was listening. Movement in the shadows alerted him. A lone alien scout, separated from its squad, stumbled into view. Marcus's instincts flared. He would have attacked immediately in another situation, but he hesitated. The predator stepped forward and Marcus froze. The scout's blaster sparked as it tried to react, but the predator was faster, its strike precise, lethal, and merciless. Marcus didn't need to aim. The threat was neutralized before it could endanger them. He swallowed hard, realizing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The predator had protected him, unasked, without hesitation. It was no longer just a creature of fear. It was an ally, albeit one with instincts far beyond his understanding. A bond had begun, fragile and tentative, yet undeniable. The galaxy had feared it, but Marcus had earned a form of respect, and that respect was a currency few could wield. Marcus glanced at the predator. Its eyes reflected the faint light of the moons, and for the first time, he saw a spark that was not purely instinct. Curiosity, recognition, and perhaps even choice glimmered within. He realized that this partnership would redefine everything he had known about survival, loyalty, and the reach of human audacity. The sound of engines returned, louder this time, signaling reinforcements. Marcus's mind raced, calculating options. But he no longer feared being alone. The predator was with him now, and together they were more than a man and a beast. They were a unit no one had anticipated. The galaxy would soon learn that intelligence, strategy, and audacity could bend even the most fearsome legends. Marcus tightened his grip on his rifle, eyes scanning the dark horizon. The predator crouched beside him, a silent promise of power and partnership. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time, Marcus felt an unfamiliar thrill. Not the fear of death, but the exhilaration of a shared purpose. Tonight, the apex predator would fight with him, and against a galaxy that had assumed it unbeatable. The first steps of that alliance were complete, and the future, uncertain and dangerous, stretched before them like an open battlefield. The story was just beginning. The hum of engines returned, louder this time, echoing across the cratered valley. Marcus pressed himself against the jagged rocks, eyes sweeping the horizon. Twin moons reflected off the predator's scales, casting shifting shadows that made it appear larger than life. He didn't need to look at the approaching ships to know who had arrived. Alien bounty hunters, mercenaries, and patrols converging on the legend they had sworn to claim. Word of his alliance had spread faster than fire through a dry forest, and every hunter in the sector had come running. Marcus felt the familiar thrill of danger, sharp and exhilarating. He adjusted the rifle in his hands, yet he didn't raise it immediately. The predator crouched beside him, a coiled force of strength and cunning, eyes never leaving the approaching fleets. Marcus had watched it move before, now he watched it anticipate. The alien ships were calculating numbers, patterns, weapons ranges, but they didn't understand unpredictability. They didn't understand humans. A laser volley struck the ridge above them, scorching stone and throwing up clouds of dust. Marcus dropped, instinct kicking in, and the predator reacted instantly, twisting its massive frame with fluid precision, jaws snapping at a hovering drone that had strayed too close. Sparks flew, metal shredded, and the drone vanished into twisted fragments. Marcus exhaled slowly. Together they were a force neither had yet fully tested. He glanced at the predator, noticing a subtle change. Its posture was sharper, more controlled. Marcus realized it had adapted to him, learned from his movements, and integrated human improvisation into its own instinct. That insight thrilled him. The galaxy had feared this creature for centuries, yet here it was being trained, if not tamed, by a human. Alien squads began to spread out, dropping from skimmers and scouting dropships. Marcus's mind raced, calculating angles, fallback points, and lines of fire. The predator seemed to sense the same variables, shifting silently, a shadow in perfect harmony with him. He raised a hand slightly, and it froze a fraction of a second as though confirming his intent. Marcus smiled grimly. This was no mere creature, it was a partner, an extension of his tactical mind. The first squad reached the open terrain. Marcus counted 4 blasters trained on the ridge. A direct firefight would be suicide. He flicked a small lever on his rifle, activating a high-frequency cloaking pulse. The ridge shimmered, the predator followed suit, their forms bending into shadows. The mercenaries fired blindly, their shots carving craters in the rock, but they couldn't hit what wasn't there. Marcus moved silently, the predator mirroring him, each step measured, each decision precise. A sudden commotion below drew their attention. A mercenary commander was attempting to flank them. Marcus considered taking the shot, but the predator anticipated his thought and leapt, its massive form striking the commander before he could react. The alien crumpled, stunned, while Marcus adjusted his aim on the remaining threats. Coordination wasn't taught, it was intuitive. The predator understood timing, threat assessment, and loyalty in ways that made Marcus's head spin. The tide of battle shifted. Alien squads were disoriented, unable to predict the human strategy or the predator's sudden interventions. Marcus realized the significance. They were not just fighting, they were rewriting expectations. The galaxy had catalogued the predator as unstoppable but mindless. Now it was learning, improvising, and choosing its battles alongside a human. That realization brought a surge of confidence. They weren't merely surviving, they were dominating. Minutes felt like hours. Blaster fire lit the valley in staccato bursts, shadows dancing across craters and wreckage. Marcus ducked, rolled, and returned fire, while the predator moved like liquid steel, cutting down threats with a precision no human could match. Each movement was deliberate, almost artistic, blending brute force and tactical calculation. Marcus had faced countless enemies, but never one who fought in perfect synchrony with him. He took a moment to catch his breath behind a shattered pillar. The predator crouched beside him, side glistening with reflected fire from distant blasts, eyes scanning, ears twitching. Marcus's chest heaved. For all its lethal reputation, the predator had restraint. It hadn't attacked recklessly. It had chosen, calculated, and protected. Marcus felt a swell of understanding. This wasn't merely an apex predator, it was capable of partnership. Loyalty, even tentative, had emerged. Above the battlefield, a dropship streaked low, dropping reinforcements into the valley. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he noticed something telling. The predator didn't flinch. It simply adjusted its stance, eyes flicking to him once as if sharing the unspoken agreement: adapt, survive, dominate. Marcus nodded slightly. Together they were no longer just hunter and hunted. They were a singular force, unpredictable and lethal. The alien reinforcements landed and spread into the smoke-filled terrain. Marcus triggered a series of micro-grenades, sending concussive waves through the valley. The predator moved through the chaos like a phantom, closing distance, striking with devastating accuracy. Marcus picked off survivors with precise shots, each one coordinated with the predator's movements. The alien forces faltered, confusion rippling through them. Humans were unpredictable, predators were feared. Combined, they were a storm the galaxy had never imagined. Finally, the last of the initial wave faltered, retreating to the edge of the valley. Silence fell, broken only by the predator's low, resonant growl. Marcus lowered his rifle, heart hammering, exhilaration mingling with exhaustion. He knew this wasn't the end, the galaxy wouldn't let it be, but for this moment they had triumphed. The predator turned to him, massive form shifting in the dim light, and Marcus felt it more than saw it. A recognition, an acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Words were unnecessary. Decisions had been made, trust had been tested, and a partnership had begun that defied expectation. Marcus exhaled, surveying the valley strewn with fallen foes and shattered machinery. The galaxy had tried to predict, control, and destroy them. They had failed. He realized the truth. Fear was a tool, but understanding, strategy, and audacity were weapons far sharper. And together, he and the predator wielded them with terrifying precision. Above the ridge, the horizon burned with the glow of incoming fleets, reinforcements that would challenge their claim. Marcus's gaze hardened, and the predator crouched beside him, muscles coiled, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. This was only the beginning. They had survived, adapted, and won a battle that should have ended them. The galaxy would soon learn that no legend could predict a human and the apex predator fighting as one. Together they prepared for the next wave. The hunt had become a war, and the galaxy had yet to witness the true extent of their partnership. Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile. They were ready. Night had settled over the valley, the twin moons casting pale silver light across shattered terrain. Marcus crouched behind a jagged ridge, surveying the quiet that followed the recent chaos. The predator lay beside him, its massive frame coiled like a living shadow, eyes scanning the horizon for threats invisible to him. Marcus's pulse had slowed, but adrenaline lingered, sharpening every sense. He realized, with a strange mixture of awe and calculation, that they were no longer simply surviving, they were learning to operate as one. The predator's presence was intoxicating in its power. Every movement, every subtle shift of its muscles, communicated an intelligence that Marcus had never encountered in a creature before. It wasn't just fearsome, it was aware. It understood consequence, patience, and strategy. Marcus studied it closely, noting how it flexed around obstacles, how its gaze flicked toward potential dangers even when none seemed present. There was something in its eyes tonight, a trace of recognition not just of him but of what they were together. He spoke softly, words meant more for himself than the predator. "We're stronger together," he said, feeling the weight of the truth in it. The predator didn't respond, yet it shifted slightly closer, a deliberate gesture that Marcus took as acknowledgement. They had survived waves of alien squads, had bested overwhelming odds, and in the process had begun to understand one another. Marcus realized that trust was being built in silence, in shared instinct and timing, and that this bond was as formidable as any weapon he had ever wielded. The sound of movement drew his attention, small, deliberate, cautious. A scouting drone hovered nearby, its sensors scanning for signs of life. Marcus signaled subtly with a hand, and the predator mirrored him, crouching lower, muscles tensing like coiled steel. The drone passed within striking distance, and in a blur of motion the predator leapt. Metal shrieked, circuits exploded, and the drone plummeted into the shadows below. Marcus exhaled, a grin tugging at his lips. They were flawless together, synchronized in ways that defied expectation. Hours passed in the rhythm of quiet vigilance. Marcus reflected on the predator, on what it represented. The galaxy had called it unstoppable, feared it, hunted it across star systems, and yet here it was, learning, adapting, choosing to fight alongside him. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but unpredictability coupled with intuition was a force the galaxy consistently underestimated. And Marcus knew it intimately. A low growl from the predator brought him back to the present. He followed its gaze toward a ridge where moonlight glinted on something metallic. Alien reinforcements, moving stealthily, likely believing the darkness would conceal them. Marcus assessed the angle, the distances, and the odds. But he didn't hesitate. With a subtle gesture, he directed the predator, and together they moved. It was a dance of lethal precision, the predator striking first, Marcus covering angles, anticipating counters, exploiting openings. Alien soldiers fell before they could understand the threat. Marcus felt exhilaration but not arrogance. Every victory was a lesson, and the predator taught as much as it learned. When the skirmish ended, silence returned. Marcus crouched, scanning the valley. The predator sat nearby, breathing steady, eyes flicking toward him with an almost imperceptible awareness. Marcus realized the depth of what had formed between them. This was more than a temporary alliance. It was a partnership born of mutual respect and necessity. Each had survived because of the other, yet each had adapted because of the other. Humanity and apex predator combined, not as master and beast, but as equals in strategy and survival. He allowed himself a moment of reflection. There was a subtle tenderness in this partnership, a recognition that beyond the fire and the bloodshed, they had found in each other something rare: trust without surrender, loyalty without obligation. Marcus had spent years in the mercenary world, watching alliances crumble at the first sign of weakness. And now, here in the silence of a war-torn valley, he felt an unfamiliar certainty. The predator was not a weapon to wield, it was a partner, perhaps the only partner who could meet him on equal terms. A faint vibration in the ground shifted his attention. He scanned the horizon. Reinforcements were approaching again, larger this time, armed with heavy plasma cannons and shield drones. Marcus felt the familiar tension coil in his chest, but this time it was tempered with anticipation. He had the predator beside him. They were unpredictable. They were lethal. The galaxy had yet to understand what that meant. He looked at the creature, its massive silhouette outlined against the twin moons. "Ready?" he whispered, more to himself than to it. The predator's eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, and Marcus interpreted the unspoken answer perfectly. Always. They were ready not just to survive but to dominate, to defy the expectations of every hunter, every overlord, every entity that believed the predator was untouchable alone. With him it had evolved, adapted, chosen a new path. Marcus adjusted his gear, checking the rifle and his limited arsenal of explosives. The predator crouched beside him, a living wall of power and instinct, as if the night itself had conspired to forge them together. He felt the familiar thrill of strategy sharpening his mind, but beneath it was something deeper: respect, understanding, and a hint of something resembling awe. The apex predator, feared across galaxies, had chosen him, not as prey, not as a threat, but as an equal. The sound of distant engines grew louder, echoing off craters and shattered terrain. Marcus tensed, yet the fear that had once been constant was replaced by clarity. They had survived ambushes, bested overwhelming odds, and learned each other's strengths. Now the galaxy would come, expecting to hunt a monster and find a human. What they would encounter instead was a partnership. A lethal fusion of intellect and instinct, human audacity and apex power. Marcus exhaled slowly, the tension in his muscles easing just slightly. The predator shifted, eyes never leaving his, a subtle movement that said more than words ever could. They would face the galaxy together, not merely surviving but shaping events in ways no one could predict. The night stretched before them, filled with danger, strategy, and possibility. And in that darkness, Marcus knew something fundamental. This was no ordinary alliance. This was the beginning of a force that would change the rules of survival across the stars. He allowed himself one last glance at the horizon, the pale light of the moons glinting off scattered wreckage. They were ready. The predator and the human, united by circumstance, respect, and necessity, would face the next wave as one. And the galaxy, unprepared for what they represented together, had no idea what was coming. The horizon burned with crimson light as the galactic armada descended upon Karath 9, massive warships casting shadows that stretched across the cratered valleys like titans preparing for judgment. Marcus crouched atop the ridge, rifle in hand, every nerve taut, every muscle poised. Beside him, the predator shifted, immense and coiled, eyes flickering with intelligence and something he dared call understanding. This was no ordinary battle. This was the culmination of every choice, every alliance, every moment that had led them here. The Overlord's fleet had arrived, larger than Marcus had anticipated, armed with plasma cannons, drone swarms, and precision strike units. Alien soldiers moved in perfect synchrony, assuming advantage, relying on numbers, technology, and reputation. They believed the predator alone was a force beyond reckoning. They had underestimated the human beside it. Marcus inhaled slowly, feeling the rhythm of the battlefield, sensing the predator's anticipation, understanding instinctively where each would act. The dance they had begun in secrecy would now be displayed across the stars. He raised his hand, and the predator mirrored him in a subtle, silent synchronization. Marcus fired first, targeting the shield emitters of a hovering drone, while the predator leapt forward with terrifying speed, crushing soldiers and shredding mechanical defenses alike. Each movement was deliberate, precise, lethal. Marcus marveled at the fluidity, the intelligence behind every strike, realizing with clarity that the predator was no longer acting on instinct alone. It had learned to anticipate, to strategize, to fight alongside him. The alien forces adjusted, but too late. Marcus had already calculated their formation, predicted their movements, and positioned the predator for maximum effect. A plasma volley struck near him, throwing dirt and sparks into the air. The predator roared in unison, a sound that reverberated across the valley, shattering morale. Soldiers faltered, hesitation spreading through ranks that had once been disciplined. Marcus felt a surge of exhilaration. Fear was a weapon, but ingenuity and unpredictability were sharper, deadlier, and entirely human. As the battle escalated, Marcus's mind raced, analyzing weak points, predicting counterattacks, coordinating silently with the predator beside him. Each enemy unit taken down became a lesson for the next, every misstep of the aliens exploited without hesitation. He could see the awe and disbelief spreading across their faces. The apex predator, feared across galaxies, now fighting not against but alongside a human. Marcus realized the galaxy had never witnessed anything like this. Humans had never been predictable, they were dangerous because of imagination, intuition, and audacity. The fleet commander descended in a massive dropship, shielded and armed to perfection. Marcus's pulse accelerated. This was the final test. He glanced at the predator, reading the subtle tension in its muscles, the narrowing of its eyes, the flicker of readiness. In that shared glance he understood it completely. They were partners, equals, a single lethal unit composed of mind and instinct. No weapon, no numbers, no reputation could match that combination. The dropship landed, releasing a wave of elite soldiers. Marcus moved first, firing with precise intent, while the Predator tore through ranks with terrifying efficiency. The soldiers fell as though time had slowed, unable to predict movements, unable to anticipate the synergy of man and Predator. Marcus ducked behind cover, a grin tugging at his lips. Every step, every shot, every coordinated strike was proof. Human ingenuity could bend even the legends. Amid the chaos, Marcus saw the Overlord emerge, flanked by heavily armed guards. The creature's roar cut through the battlefield, and he felt its gaze lock onto the intruder. Marcus followed the Predator's lead, moving with speed and precision. Each step forward was a gamble, but the Predator's coordination turned chance into certainty. Marcus struck first, disabling a guard with calculated precision. The Predator moved like liquid steel, dismantling the remaining defenders in moments. Together they advanced on the Overlord. The final confrontation was near. The Overlord's arrogance radiated, believing control could be maintained through intimidation and firepower. Marcus felt no fear, only focus, tempered by respect for the Predator's judgment. They closed in, moving as one, instinct and strategy fused. The Predator lunged, knocking the Overlord off balance, and Marcus delivered the final calculated shot. Silence fell instantly, broken only by the low growl of the Predator, now calm and vigilant. Marcus exhaled, the tension of anticipation finally leaving him. He approached the Predator, hand resting lightly on its scaled flank. Its eyes met his, and in that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental. The galaxy had feared a creature they could not control. He had forged trust, partnership, and mutual respect. The Predator had not been tamed, it had chosen, just as he had. Together they had rewritten expectations not through domination alone, but through understanding, strategy, and unyielding audacity. He crouched beside the Predator, surveying the battlefield. Wrecked drones, scorched earth, fallen soldiers, and shattered warships sprawled across the valley. The galaxy would speak of this encounter for generations. A human had faced the apex Predator, and survived. Better yet, he had thrived. Marcus understood that this was more than victory, it was a testament to humanity's audacity, adaptability, and cunning. The Predator shifted, massive muscles coiling and relaxing, as if acknowledging their bond had been tested and proven true. Marcus felt an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest, pride, respect, and the thrill of discovery. They had survived, adapted, and dominated together. The galaxy had underestimated what a human could achieve when paired with a force it could not comprehend. Marcus adjusted his gear, glancing at the Predator one last time before scanning the horizon. Reinforcements might come, new challenges might rise, but he knew this. They were ready. The Predator and the human, united not by subjugation but by choice, intelligence, and mutual respect, had become something no one could predict and no one could defeat. He allowed himself a moment of reflection, watching the twin moons cast their light over the valley. They had begun as hunter and hunted, yet now they stood as equals, partners bound by necessity, strategy, and understanding. The galaxy had been forced to acknowledge a simple truth. Human ingenuity paired with the apex Predator's power was a combination beyond reckoning. Marcus exhaled, hand resting lightly on the Predator's flank, and a small, grim smile touched his lips. Together they would face whatever the universe dared to throw at them. The apex Predator had chosen a human, and that choice had rewritten the rules. And as the valley fell into silence, Marcus knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never forget the day a human and the apex Predator became unstoppable.